May 1995, the tranquil town of Maplewood, Oregon, was shaken by the sudden disappearance of Lucas Harrington, a cherished carpenter known for his warmth and generosity within the community. By February 1996, the mystery deepened when Lucas's body was discovered buried beneath the flower bed of his own backyard. What began as a missing persons case evolved into a harrowing tale of the terrain and greed in the terrain. Investigations revealed the chilling secrets of his wife, Clara Harrington, and her lover, Ethan Monroe, exposing the extreme lengths they pursued to fulfill their illicit desires. On the brisk morning of February 14, 1996, Maplewood police officers were dispatched to a modest residence on Pine Hollow Lane. The crisp air carried the faint scent of blooming crocuses, an eerie contrast to the grim discovery that awaited them. An anonymous tip received the previous evening led officers to the backyard of 214 Pine Hollow Lane, where a life full of promise had been cruelly extinguished. The house belonged to Clara Harrington and her new husband, Ethan Monroe, a couple whose life seemed idyllic from the outside. As officers began digging under the well-manicured flower bed, the atmosphere grew heavy with dread. Neighbors peered through drawn curtains, their faces etched with disbelief and unease. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered along the sidewalks, murmuring theories about what lay beneath the soil. Shovels cut through the earth, revealing layers of damp dirt and tangled roots. Just before noon, the edge of a tarp came into view, tightly wrapped around a human form. Officers exchanged somber glances as the lifeless body was unearthed. The remains were later identified as Lucas Harrington, a man beloved in Maplewood for his kindness and craftsmanship. Lucas had been reported missing 8 months earlier. At the time, Clara explained his absence with vague stories of marital discord and erratic behavior. In the days that followed, the investigation intensified. On February 16, 1996, Clara Harrington sat in a sterile interview room at the Maplewood Police Department. Harsh fluorescent lights cast unforgiving shadows across her composed face. She appeared calm, her fingers lightly resting on the table before her. When questioned about Lucas's disappearance, Clara painted a picture of a man struggling with inner demons. She described him as distant and erratic in the weeks leading up to his vanishing. It was a convenient narrative that had initially deflected suspicion away from her. Ethan Monroe, who had quietly entered Clara's life in the months following Lucas's disappearance, was also interrogated. He corroborated Clara's story, insisting their relationship only began after Lucas had purportedly left. His tone was steady, his responses deliberate. However, despite their composed exteriors, investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies in their accounts. Forensic experts meticulously combed through the backyard and the modest home that Clara had once shared with Lucas. Soil samples from the burial site contained microscopic fibers that matched a tarp found in the garage. Fibers from the same tarp were also discovered on Clara's gardening gloves, which had been carelessly discarded in a corner of the basement. These seemingly minor details began to weave a damning tapestry of evidence. Financial records uncovered during the investigation revealed an even darker story. Clara had drained Lucas's savings account in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. The transactions were staggering, involving high-end furniture purchases and unexplained cash withdrawals. This sudden spending spree contrasted sharply with the financial prudence for which Lucas was known. Neighbors added to the growing list of suspicions. Several reported seeing Ethan's truck parked outside the Harrington home late at night, long before Lucas was reported missing. Others described Clara's abrupt change in demeanor following Lucas's disappearance. Once reserved and soft-spoken, she transformed into a vibrant figure who frequently hosted gatherings at her home. Detectives pieced together a timeline that suggested a sinister reality far removed from Clara's claims. Ethan, initially introduced as a professional acquaintance, had become a regular visitor to the Harrington home. Their business interactions quickly evolved into a passionate affair. By the end of that fateful week, investigators had gathered enough evidence to identify Clara and Ethan as the prime suspects. The discovery of Lucas's body, the financial irregularities, the fibers, and whispers of an illicit relationship painted a chilling picture of betrayal. What had begun as a quiet investigation into a missing man unraveled into a tale of greed, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder. The facade of normalcy that Clara and Ethan had so carefully constructed began to crumble under the weight of the truth. Lucas Harrington had been a cornerstone of Maplewood's community. At 41 years old, he was the person neighbors called when their roofs leaked or fences needed mending. His easy smile and steady demeanor made him a comforting presence in the town. For over a decade, he and Clara had built a life together in their modest home. To outsiders, their marriage appeared solid, but cracks had formed long before that fateful summer of 1995. Clara, initially drawn to Lucas's stability, began to grow restless. Years of routine dulled her ambitions, and she longed for more excitement, more luxury, and more attention. Though Lucas sensed her dissatisfaction, he remained devoted, believing that his hard work and unwavering love were enough. But it wasn't. Clara distanced herself emotionally, spending evenings at upscale events under the guise of network. It was at one of these gatherings in late 1993 that she met Ethan Monroe, a charismatic and ambitious man who was everything Lucas was not. At 44, Ethan had his own troubles. A messy divorce had left him seeking solace, and Clara offered exactly that. Their connection was instant and intoxicating. For months they carried on their affair in secret, fueled by shared frustrations and dangerous fantasies of a new life. By the spring of 1995, their relationship had intensified, and Lucas, though unaware of the affair, began to notice Clara's detachment. On the evening of May 10, 1995, Lucas's suspicions were confirmed. Arriving home early from a project, he found Clara and Ethan together in the living room. The confrontation was as volatile as it was inevitable. Neighbors later reported hearing muffled shouting from the house, though no one intervened. Inside, tempers flared until the argument turned physical. Ethan, fearing exposure, grabbed a heavy object from the kitchen counter and struck Lucas. The room fell silent as Lucas collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Panic set in. Ethan was visibly shaken, but it was Clara who took charge. Her reaction was chillingly pragmatic. Seeing an opportunity to free herself from a marriage she resented, she convinced Ethan they had no choice but to cover up the crime. Together they wrapped Lucas's body in a tarp, their hands trembling as they worked in eerie silence. Every sound, the rustle of the tarp, the scrape of the shovel, seemed amplified. Over the next several hours, they buried Lucas in the backyard. The spot was chosen deliberately. Clara had often mentioned wanting to install a flower bed there, an idea that now served as the perfect cover. As dawn broke over Maplewood, the lawn bore faint signs of their gruesome act. Exhausted but determined, Clara began crafting their alibi. By mid-morning, she was casually informing friends that Lucas had left after an argument the night before. Her tone was calm, her delivery flawless. Over the next few weeks, Clara planted details to support her narrative, telling anyone who would listen that Lucas had been struggling with personal issues and needed time away. Meanwhile, Ethan became a fixture at the Harrington home. Although neighbors found his frequent visits suspicious, Clara dismissed their concerns, claiming he was helping her with renovations. By November 1995, Ethan had moved in. To the outside world, it seemed Clara had moved on from Lucas's sudden disappearance. Few questioned her decision to remarry so quickly, though whispers of impropriety circulated among Maplewood's more observant residents. The family's dealings had appeared on the spine but hardly moved the needle. On a chilly afternoon in January 1996, Clara and Ethan exchanged vows in a small ceremony held in the backyard. Friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate, their laughter echoing above the very ground where Lucas lay buried. The newly installed flower bed, adorned with potted plants, served as the centerpiece of their nuptials. Photos from that day would later horrify investigators. A smiling couple surrounded by blooms, oblivious guests, and the chilling reality hidden beneath their feet. For months, Clara and Ethan lived as though nothing had happened. However, secrets as dark as theirs rarely stay buried for long. On February 12, 1996, the facade crumbled. Forensic evidence collected from the tarp and tools in the garage painted an undeniable picture. Fibers from the tarp matched traces found on Clara's gardening gloves and under Ethan's fingernails, Soil samples from the shovel matched the disturbed ground in the backyard. Faced with mounting evidence, Ethan was the first to break. In a tearful confession, he detailed the events of that fateful night, his voice trembling as he implicated Clara as the mastermind. Ethan described her cold determination and how she convinced him that removing Lucas was the only way they could be together. He claimed she had orchestrated every step, framing the situation as their sole path to happiness. Clara's arrest sent shockwaves through Maplewood. The woman who had once been a staple at charity events and community gatherings was now the central figure in a gruesome murder investigation. Though her polished exterior began to crack under the weight of evidence, she steadfastly proclaimed her innocence, asserting that Ethan had acted alone. As the truth unraveled, Maplewood struggled to reconcile the image of the woman they thought they knew with the one capable of such calculated cruelty. The events of May 10, 1995 marked the beginning of a dark chapter for the town. Lucas Harrington's death was not just a tragedy, but a profound betrayal by those he trusted most. The aftermath left an indelible scar on the community, a chilling reminder of the lengths people can go for ambition and deceit. The trial began in October 1996, held in the Jefferson County Courthouse. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air heavy with the weight of the case. Local reporters mingled with national media, eager to cover what was being called one of the most shocking betrayals in recent history. Clara Harrington, poised but visibly strained, sat beside her defense team, her face a blend of defiance and unease. Across the room, Ethan Monroe, her former lover and co-defendant, avoided her gaze, his once confident demeanor replaced with resignation. The prosecution, led by a relentless district attorney, meticulously laid out their case. Clara was painted as the mastermind, a woman whose greed and ambition drove her to manipulate Ethan into committing murder. The evidence was damning: receipts for luxury items purchased with Lucas's drained savings, photographs of the backyard ceremony held directly above his grave, and chilling details of Clara's orchestrated lies. Each piece of evidence deepened the audience's disbelief and outrage. While Ethan's role in the crime was undeniable, his testimony became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case against Clara. He spoke of their affair in measured, almost rehearsed tones, recounting how Clara captivated him with promises of a life free from the constraints of her marriage. Ethan described the night of the murder in painstaking detail, admitting his role in the attack but insisting Clara had planned it all. Throughout his testimony, Clara remained impassive, her expression betraying little emotion. Clara's defense team worked tirelessly to discredit Ethan. They argued that he acted out of jealousy and rage, portraying Clara as a victim of his manipulative tendencies. The defense pointed to Ethan's history of impulsive behavior and short tempers, suggesting he fabricated elements of his confession to secure a lighter sentence. They painted Clara as a woman caught in circumstances beyond her control, struggling to hold her life together after her husband's disappearance. The trial took a darker turn when the prosecution presented love letters exchanged between Clara and Ethan in the months leading up to Lucas's death. The letters spoke of forbidden love, longing, and a willingness to take drastic measures to be together. One letter in particular left the courtroom in stunned silence. In it, Clara wrote of how Lucas's presence made her feel trapped, and her desperate dream of starting anew with Ethan, no matter the cost. Witnesses for both sides added layers of complexity to the narrative. Neighbors described Clara's erratic behavior in the months following Lucas's disappearance, recalling how her demeanor shifted from withdrawn and somber to outwardly jubilant. One neighbor remembered her laughing and hosting a dinner party just weeks after Lucas was last seen. Bass testified about his temper and history of conflicts, casting doubt on his claims of being manipulated by Clara. The emotional toll on Lucas's family became apparent as the trial progressed. His elderly mother attended every session, clutching a photograph of her son and wiping away tears as details of his brutal death were recounted. Friends of Lucas spoke of his kindness, his unwavering dedication to his craft, and his dreams of building a future with Clara. Their testimonies served as a sobering reminder of the life that had been stolen and the void left in its place. The trial concluded in December 1996, more than a year after Lucas's body had been discovered. On December 15, 1996, the jury delivered its verdict. The courtroom was packed, the air electric with anticipation. Clara Harrington was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict reflected the jury's belief that she had orchestrated the crime, driven by greed and a desire for freedom. Her sentence? Life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision brought a ripple of relief to Lucas's grieving family and the community of Maplewood. Ethan Monroe, having cooperated with the prosecution, received a 15-year sentence for second-degree murder. His reduced charge reflected his confession and willingness to testify against Clara, but it did little to earn him sympathy from the public. As Clara was led out of the courtroom, flanked by guards, she maintained the same composed exterior she had displayed throughout the trial. For those who had followed the case, the verdict marked the end of a grim chapter. The story of Lucas Harrington's life and untimely death left an indelible mark on Maplewood. The town, once defined by neighborly trust and small-town charm, became synonymous with a chilling betrayal. The Harrington home, where so many memories had been made, now stood as a somber reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. By the spring of 1997, Lucas's family decided to sell the property. They could no longer bear the sight of the house that had once symbolized love and hard work, but was now tainted by betrayal. The infamous flower bed, under which Lucas's body had been buried, was the first thing to go. The new owners demolished it and replaced it with a small garden. Vibrant flowers began to bloom where the town's darkest secret had once been hidden. The years following the trial saw the lives of Clara Harrington and Ethan Monroe take drastically different paths. Clara adjusted to life behind bars, but by 1999, she had begun granting interviews to true crime authors and documentary filmmakers. In these carefully staged appearances, she maintained her innocence, claiming that Ethan had manipulated her and that the justice system had failed her. Clara portrayed herself as a victim of circumstance, a woman unfairly vilified by a sensationalized media and betrayed by the man she loved. However, her lack of genuine remorse was glaring to those who watched. Clara rarely mentioned Lucas by name, choosing instead to focus on her own suffering. To the people of Maplewood, these interviews were nothing more than an attempt to rewrite the narrative. They saw her as a woman consumed by greed and ambition, willing to sacrifice anything, even the life of her husband, for her desires. Her private life was of little interest to her, though, since she rarely left the house, and most people even less so. Ethan Monroe, on the other hand, retreated into obscurity after serving his sentence. Released from prison in 2011, he chose not to seek the spotlight. Unlike Clara, Ethan seemed haunted by guilt, his once charismatic demeanor replaced by a quiet and withdrawn existence. Those who encountered him described a man burdened by his past, avoiding any mention of the case or his role in it. For the town of Maplewood, the story of Lucas Harrington became more than just a crime. It was a cautionary tale. Parents would recount his kindness to their children, warning them of the dangers of unchecked ambition and betrayal. By 2005, the garden that replaced the infamous flower bed had flourished, its bittersweet symbol of renewal. Yet no amount of transformation could erase the memories of what had occurred there. Lucas's family channeled their grief into a meaningful cause. In 1998, they established the Lucas Harrington Memorial Fund, a charitable organization designed to support struggling families and local businesses. The fund reflected Lucas's generous spirit and became a beacon of hope for Maplewood. Over the years, it helped dozens of families rebuild their lives, providing a sense of closure and healing for a community scarred by tragedy. As time passed, the scars of the case began to fade, but they never disappeared entirely. The Harrington home, once a symbol of love and hard work, became a hushed landmark, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most pristine facades. By 2015, many of the original residents of Maplewood had moved on, and the town slowly returned to its former sense of quiet normalcy. Yet, those who remembered Lucas would never forget the betrayal that took his life. The tale of Clara Harrington serves as a haunting reminder of the lengths some will go to escape the lives they've built and the profound cost of such actions. For Maplewood, Lucas Harrington's legacy lived on, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience and kindness in the face of darkness. If you enjoyed this dive into the mystery, don't forget to subscribe to True Crime OCS for more chilling stories from history's darkest corners. Drop your thoughts, theories, and questions in the comments below. Let's untangle the truth together. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.